What's good, bossman? Let's talk about weapons and stuff. This is like my Nations and Races video, a brief overview about how things are and work in Arknights. We will only cover the mechanics of weapons that appear at least a couple of times, not the very unique ones like Hoshiguma's fidget spinner or for Linux device. Let's just jump right into it. The simple stuff first. Swords. You use them to cut and or stab. They come in all shapes and sizes, most of them similar to the ones we find in our world. Katanas, rapiers, you name it. Even curved swords. In addition, there are people carrying comically large swords in Arknights. Usually it's members of the races with naturally strong physiques. Apart from those showers, there are also growers, by which I mean short swords, daggers and such. There are many swords enhanced by arts. They vary a lot in strength, but they mostly work on the same principles. You have a sword and you use your arts in order to make them stronger or give them a certain ability. Interestingly enough, a lot of them, like Franka's rapier and those reunion lads, work pretty similarly. They ignore armor. Not all of course though, but the fact that both our ops and our enemies have similar stuff shows that that's some common stuff. Franka's file tells us that her sword is crafted out of originium, but there is no way of telling whether this is something exclusive to people and organizations with a big budget or not. The arts swords we encounter are pretty much originium colored, but that's not a clear confirmation. Let's quickly talk about the mechanics of arts swords. Lapland's file tells us that her sword is complementing her arts, so we can kinda guess that the stronger variants of arts swords are built around the arts of its user, while the mass-produced ones are just standardized and you get some basic arts knowledge in order to make them work. The description of the Caprine rioters from Volumunde tells us that arts knowledge is common in Laetanian, random normies can use those swords. And of course there are also gigantic versions of them swords. The swords the Avengers are carrying are not confirmed to be arts-based, by the way. They are just special weapons, so maybe they literally just cover their blades in oil and ignite them to make your life living hell. Sometimes it's the small things in life that matter. There's a bunch of heavy melee weapons in wide varieties on top of good old swords. Tactical battle axes and hammers being the most common. Most of the reunion guys wielding axes and whatnot are just random people weaponizing tools, which apparently are commonly found in Terra. The tactical variants work exactly the same way, just different. The common purpose of all them is to inflict heavy damage, but the tactical ones are enhanced. The hammers that both Savage and the reunion demolitionists are wielding, for example, use originium in order to enhance the strength of the impact of their strikes. On the side of Rhodes Island, we can also find a bunch of people enhancing the heavy weaponry with arts, like Frostleaf. A form of heavy weaponry we don't really see in our world are big chainsaws and pizza cutters. Big Bobs and Big Adams ones are electrically powered, which makes sense, since there isn't any gasoline in Arknights they could pour in those bad boys. And as with every weapon, there are arts-enhanced versions of them, the most known being of course Blaze. Fisting weapons are quite interesting. There are a few weapons that work this way. Feta is the most well-known example. As you can see, those big punching gloves aren't punching gloves, they are fisters, attached to her arms, meant to be an extension of her arm. A sort of variation can be found in Reunion with those guys, but they don't have fisters, they have blades. Something both Feta and those Chavis have in common is the martial arts aspect of it. They all are martial artists who use those weapons to make their moves stronger, more lethal, that stuff. Lances also exist. They are those big pointy sticks that fast circus donnies use. But let's get to the non-melee stuff now. And let's get one thing out of the way from the get-go. The vast majority of ranged weapons in Arknights aren't firearms. All these guys right here carry weapons which look like firearms, but they just aren't. The thing is that the world of Arknights is filled with technological wonders. Mobile cities, factories which can produce gold, materials which look delicious, just to name a few, but apparently they never invented gunpowder. Guns in Arknights are based on originium arts, but let's talk about the non-gunner ranged weapons first. As I said, all these guys don't have guns. They have different variations of the ranged weapon of choice of most Rhodes Island snipers, the crossbow. The crossbows of Arknights come in huge amount of variations, from the teeny tiny one that Acid Drop is carrying, to the massive goddamn thing that Schwartz has. No matter the size though, they all work on the same fundamental principles. As you can see here very clearly, all these crossbows not only have one normal string which shoots the bolt, you have a very long string which I assume uses a block and tackle system to enhance its strength by a multitude. The crossbows in this game are strong. Lord Tachanka says that some of them easily can be as powerful as one of our guns in a range of up to 100 meters. And if a Russian strongman says it, it has to be true. Reloading crossbows most likely works differently depending on the model. Those guys right here have models with a rotary or maybe even a drum magazine. Those guys can be seen actually using their arms to reload. Try checking your snipers and your enemies' animations. Some of them can be seen reloading. For some of them, the bolts just seem to magically appear. It is what it is. There of course is a big variation of the crossbow. You see those being carried by very strong people, like the Sarkas mercenaries or Schwartz. The ballistas that randomly spawn every now and then in order to poke your operators could be seen as an even larger variation of that. Another ranged weapon worth talking about are the bows of Arknights. They seem to function exactly as the crossbows of Arknights, just without the cross. It's literally just the bow. Another ranged weapon we've seen in at least one event is the javelin, thrown by the tribals we meet in Sargon. Just a spear you throw, nothing big. But most of the information I've given you up to this point is not mind-blowing. You are my viewers, you know how modernized medieval weapons work. We will now get into the real spicy stuff. Firearms. The firearms of Terra optically exactly resemble the ones of our world. I've read this article a long time ago where someone found the real world equivalent of every firearm in Arknights, including all the stuff around Exia here. However, that's exactly where the similarities end. According to operator files, the guns Team Rainbow brought with them are heavier than the guns of Terra, which means that the ones in Terra are lighter. They work entirely on Originium arts. According to Grandpa Rangers, a Laterano gunsmith once told him that both every gun and every single bullet basically are caster's staffs. Madness. The bullets all contain a tiny casting unit powered by a very small piece of Originium. These bullets resonate with the casting unit of the gun, and that's how they get triggered. Casting units, this Originium pieces that you need arts to operate guns. Remember that the gunsmith Rangers talked to was a Laterano? A huge part of Laterano's inhabitants are the Sancta, a race which straight up gets born with a high affinity to arts. Naturally, it's usually them who get seen operating guns. When the Sarkas mercenaries of Originium Dust encountered Team Rainbow, they thought that they were Sancta, as they were operating fully automated firearms. But we have a few more operators who use guns without being Sancta. For example, Jessica, Liskam and Franca, the Blacksteel girls. I'm sorry, Vanilla. In Originium Dust and in Operational Intelligence, they explain how that's possible. Apparently, if you actually make an effort, get into arts and properly train, you will be able to operate firearms, at least the pistols you can see them using. It makes sense for a professional security company like Blacksteel to give their operators at least a basic understanding of the arts you use for guns. But you don't need a giga corporation if you want to use a firearm in Arknights. W, for example, straight up has killed a few Laterano gun knights and uses their weapons. Quite lovely. A few guns seem to be circulating the black markets of Terra. Cesar, for example, used to make a living out of trading weapons, including those. Cesar himself uses a grenade launcher, those are also Originium based, and with his technical knowledge he modified it a lot in order to turn down the level of arts knowledge needed to operate it. So yeah, to summarize, the guns of Arknights, both the weapon and the bullets operate on Originium arts and require at least a basic understanding to be operated. The Sancta, who naturally are into arts, are the ones most commonly seen using guns, but a few professionals and criminals are also able to use them. Guns are staffs with extra steps. Now it might make a little bit more sense to why Absinthe's staff looks a lot like a gun. But today is not the day we will talk about Originium arts. That will get its own video one day, but who knows when that will be. Do you know what I really want to talk about as well? I got the idea for that while writing this script. I want to talk about how warfare works in Arknights, showing the information I have accumulated over the time and adding my own thoughts. But that will also have to wait, because there's still some stuff I want to cover from Originium Dust. Do you know who will be covered now? Our lovely channel supporters and operators, and our absolutely lovely channel commanders, Azriel, Big Bob, Chris, Lowkey, Vritten and Zephyrinix. Thanks so much for your support, guys, and to you, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and I will see you next time. Cheers!